Hello, this is Matt Goodman with another update and the beginning of a 5-week sprint. We had a home and garden tour scheduled for beginning part of June, so we had to get some work done so that the layout would be presentable. Um, Dad, my brother, and a friend came over to do some work on the fascia, and Bill, who's in the background here on the right-hand side, he did the hard work of getting the large number of the remaining feeders attached. Um, then Ben spent a lot of time working on the right end of the attachment of the fascia, which I hadn't really designed for. So they had to kind of fiddle with the existing structure and make something work. In some ways, this work was easy because I had designed for the fascia to be attached to the spokes of the benchwork through this section. In other words, it was difficult because the connection between two had to be on a curve. So it took some effort to figure out how to make that work, and this crew helped me do that. Next work session, Christy and I, mostly Christy in this case, working to cover up the bench work. A flat surface with things on it will be actually more interesting to a casual observer than just bench work. So she worked on getting this curve to fit for a while, and meanwhile I'm doing some final feeder attachments so I can get trains running in the near future. At the left end there had very few feeders, just enough to get it running because the track there is temporary. The 19th, you'll see that trains are running. I spent much of this morning just running trains around back and forth, make sure everything was working, make sure the wiring was good, make sure no dead spots. And that led to our first derailment. Christy's fastening the foam down to the benchwork and leaned in at the same time the train was passing by, and down to the floor they went. No harm, no foul, and moved on. And next thing we did, or she did, oh, actually, I forgot about this part. Ended up spreading some rail through here. I had very few spikes to this section, and the rail backed out at the tie plate saddles. And rail spread just like the prototype, and train went on the ground. Last part through here, after Christy has fastened or adhesed, if that's a word, the foam down to the benchwork, she's going to use some sculpting mold to blend the higher section to the right, the lower section left. This is all upgrade through here, so each section of foam was a little bit higher than the last. The next session was another work session with Dad. He came over to watch trains run. Here I have two running, a proper steam locomotive powered train and a diesel powered track cleaning train. The goal for today is to get the next section of fascia mounted there to the left, and also do some final alignment on a straightaway. This section that we're looking at now and sighting down is permanent rail. So I asked Dad to make some alignment tweaks. He was a semi-railroader back in the day. He was one of the founders of the Hocking Valley Scenic Railroad. And his profession of architecture requires he be good at these kind of things. I'm now working on the spiking of the Central Valley ties, which is bending over plastic spikes. This is a tedious process. I just got one rail done here, and I'll finish the other one later. Next was fixing the fascia in place. We have screws in the center, which Dad is doing now. And then on the two ends, there's a couple of locations where they need to be fixed in place, but that's going to require some fabrication and extension of the existing joists that are underneath the pink foam. Christy's now doing some thought work on how she's going to hang the skirting. End up using wire under here, which will be more of that later. And then after that, back to doing some spike bending on the ties. Christy is plugging some final holes in the foam, cutting and fitting that in and gluing it in place. And she's got a couple of farm buildings set out. She's trying to visualize a scene here. That'll be kind of a test scene. Hope to have a few sections of scenery done or partially complete for the tour. So once that masking's up, here I'm looking at the trains going through the curve to make sure everything looks good and smooth through the transitions and the center part of the curves before I do some final anchoring of the ties. And I do that via styrene glue on the end of the ties. Next was some more work on fascia, but also starting to work on some scenic stuff. So we've got Trainmasters TV running here to get some ideas about base scenery and basic static grass stuff and dirt and that kind of thing. So Christy's now working on putting down a temporary piece of track that we're going to use to display a train in front of this farm scene you should be building later. So she's putting that in place as just a piece of Atlas flex track, and she'll get that ballasted. Cinder for sub road bed, and then ballast on the road bed. Now down goes the initial covering, which is just a green foam, ground foam sort of thing. I love the way she does this work. Just the glue is flying down and turns green afterwards. On again with some more work around the farm. She has what's going to be the driveway masked off. Doing her process of throwing the glue down and sprinkling her base foam over that. And once it's done, of course, the masking tape will be pulled up to expose the driveway. I'm learning a lot from watching this video because I was on the left side most of the day working on some joist extensions to attach the fascia to. And watching this video, I learned quite a bit how to one way do scenery. Christy just got this just do it approach that I can't quite match. I didn't plan too much. She just does. It's a great way to learn. And here we're doing some airbrushing of the dummy track just to kind of downplay some of the shine. Next for Christy is the ballast shoulders. It's just straight white glue with some crushed limestone ballast sprinkled on top of that. Below that, you can't quite see in this picture, but there is a cinder subbase beneath that. Meanwhile, on the left side, I'm still working on getting those benchwork extensions constructed and fastened in place. I'm referring to my computer for a drawing I did on CAD rail that includes the benchwork layer. And the nice thing about this is I can refer to that, see where the joist intersects with the fascia and the angle at which it does so, and I can get a pretty good guess on what the cut should be. So I'm popping up and down as I'm making the cut, and I'm gluing the extension in place. I'll clamp that in place and wait for that to dry, and once it's dry, I can shoot a screw through the fascia to secure that section of the curve. Here's a close-up of what that looks like when it's done. Here's a quick image of what I expect the roadbed to look like, and here's some still images of Christy finishing up her scenery with static grass. Next up for me was to extend the fascia down through in front of Circleville. I had made some design decisions to put those lower standoffs at 16-inch centers. The idea being that way they wouldn't line up with the joists above. The problem is that makes it hard to mount the fascia and have the screws lined up with one another, which is strictly an aesthetic choice, but it's something I wanted to do. So to fix that, I decided to put some 1x2 extensions across the standoffs and across the joists, and that way I can put the screws where they need to be. Shown here is a shim to bring the joist out far enough to intersect properly with the mounting strip. And I use shims all over the place, mostly cardstock business cards folded in half and whatnot to give myself a nice straight edge. So once that's done, I'm putting the fascia up and clamping in place and marking the spots with some screws. And I'll get those shot in. The one slight side benefit to putting these rails on is that there's, first of all, they're a belly bumper, so you can lean against that pretty hard without anything flexing. And also it gives me 3/4 of an inch extra of possible scenic scenes. So I like the idea well enough that I decided to extend it down one more joist space. So I had to relocate some standoffs and let that happen. To relocate the standoffs, I used a pocket hole jig that my son had bought me a few Christmases ago, and that was really handy. And now the same approach on the left end. You can see my shop down there underneath the layout. Chop saw and a vac. Keeps things pretty clean. The next section of fascia had to be a little taller to allow the left end I wanted the street to descend to the railroad tracks. So I needed a taller piece of fascia there, and for that I needed a short extension to make sure this tall fascia made it all the way through that scene. Fascia I cut on a fixture that looks a lot like this. Matter of fact, exactly like this. Then after that, it's just a matter of getting everything fastened in place, marking the screw positions, and using automatic center punch to get it started. Following the center punch, it's drilling a pilot hole, a clearance hole, and then shooting the screw in. Now we're just about a little more than a week away from the home garden tour, and Christy's going and putting the skirting up, which really transforms the look of the layout. Here I'm transferring the track plan, which is on tracing paper, onto the pink foam beneath it by using a small punch. Just poke a hole through the plan, marked where the streets were, and so forth. After I remove the plan, put the buildings back out to make sure I could still locate them properly to the holes. And the next step was to paint the surface of the pink foam to make it no longer pink. So I got everything masked off. And I used a brown that I bought years back for a base color for the previous layout. Christy wanted to make some small tweaks to the color, so she made some very precise applications of a minor amount of other colors to paint to blend in. So that's cinder gray and living room yellow. That's the color she used for the farmyard, and she was happy with it. After the paint dried, I put some great stuff foam in the gap between the homosode spline and the formerly pink foam. And here I'm using a razor knife to cut it off flush with the scenery while trains run. Then finally we're on to scenery. Here I'm putting down a piece of dummy track that I'll be using to, that'll set in front of Esmeralda Canning Company. And the goal is to do a little bit of scenery around these two areas, Container Corporation at the bottom and Esmeralda in the middle, so that we have something that people can take a look at. So I'm putting some diluted glue around the piers of the loading platform Esmeralda, and putting some glue between the ties so I can have a weedy look. And then out comes the Hecky grass applicator. Once that's complete, then Chrissy's going to do the same with Esmeralda. So we've got the track in place and painting up again where I want the grass to be, especially around the base of the building so that the building looks like it's planted in the ground. This is always the fun part, and we learned a lot from this. From between the farm work and this, we got a little better at applying the static grass. Here we're putting up telephone poles in the farm scene. These are Rapido telephone poles, and here's a couple of shots of the finished products. Farm scene with a staged train, followed by Dad's model of the Esmeralda Canning Company and its grassy spur, and an overall view of the layout room. And finally, it's the home and garden tour day. This is a 2-hour segment of that 4-hour tour, all compressed down to 1 minute. The railroad wasn't the main feature of the house, but everybody who came downstairs seemed to really enjoy what they saw. I think everyone loves seeing life in miniature. And having Dad down there hosting, of course he grew up in Circleville and his interest is what spurred mine. Having him hosting just kind of gave some context to it. Hope you enjoyed this video, and now it's time for me to take a rest after this 5-week sprint. Thanks for watching.